excited this morning to have an awesome interview with none other than the talented author, Mr. John Robinson. Let me tell you a little bit about John Robinson. He comes from humble beginnings to becoming a millionaire twice in his lifetime. I don't know how many people can actually say that. He weaves the story of his life, born in the Deep South by his mother, living the life of a migrant worker. John endures the hardship of a troubled childhood, and after reading this book and learning more about the abuse that he actually suffered from his stepfather and so forth, we're going to talk more about that, as well as the marriage, everlasting marriage that he had for many years that we know here in the United States, that the rate of divorce has increased. So we're going to talk to Mr. Robinson about a lot of things, and we're going to learn more about why he named his book Chicken Scratch. So welcome, Mr. Robinson. How you doing today?
I'm doing just great, just fine.
Just awesome. So I'm excited to have you on today to talk about your book, Chicken Scratch. Now, before we go into the depth of the book, because I mean, it was some meaty information. Just reading it, there were times when my mouth was wide open, but you left nothing to the imagination. You gave us everything that we needed to know. But first, tell us, why did you actually title your book Chicken Scratch?
Well, it's kind of like my life. Like, it's an old word that was used back in the days when people couldn't read nor write, and they was deprived of getting an education, and it motivated me to look at it. When you look at the handwriting, real scrambled, it says, what is this? It's just chicken scratch. So my life was kind of mixed up like chicken scratch, and when you look into it, it was something hard to understand, but once you get to reading into it, you can come to familiarize yourself with what actually occurred in my life, and it inspired me to name it Chicken Scratch.
That's awesome. So your analogy of your story, basically, it's hard to read, but I'm going to give you the information. I can explain it to you, but you might have to listen to me to explain to you, but you trying to grasp the concept, you might not get it unless you hear it from me. It's kind of like what you're saying.
Exactly.
That's so amazing. So within this book, let's get into the book. But first, you actually dedicated your book to your wife, Terry, of 40 years. I mean, that is a number that we don't hardly hear nowadays in regards to marriages. So just explain to everybody, how did you both get to that 4-0? Because a lot of marriages out there don't last that long, as we know. In America, there is an increase of divorce rate over 50%. So tell us a little bit about you marrying Terry, how you met, and just a little bit about all the information.
Well, with Terry and I, it's a long story. We've been married now, actually, for 46 years. This year, October the 14th, it'll be our 46th year of marriage. And wow. I actually was taken in by his father, as you read in Chicken Scratch, at the age of 14. And I didn't realize that I was going to end up marrying the man's daughter, Mr. Bud Wright's daughter. But we became acquainted, and over the years...
Wait, Mr. Robinson. So you married your stepfather's daughter?
No, Mr. Wright was someone who took me in.
Okay, okay. I thought this was about to get real juicy. Like, wait.
No, he was the one that took me in.
Okay, the guy that took you in. Okay, now, so yeah. My apologies. We was about to go into another subject here.
I understand that. Yes, indeed. Yes, it was someone that took me in at a young age, and I didn't realize I ended up marrying his daughter, but I did. And over the years, we got to know each other, and we started our little family. And actually, when I married her, I was 19, she was 16, and we had a very, very interesting life, and had a lot of hills and ups and downs in it, but we made it through. Terry, one of the reasons I dedicated the book to her, and the main reason were that during the 12 years of litigation that we went through, she held the family together. and some of the times when we went through the hardships that it was unbearable for me, she would actually take the children and take them to places like Walt Disney, Disneyland, and I made certain that they stayed free of the pain that I was suffering. And she was the type of mother that made certain that the children was as comfortable as possible as we went through this struggle with this litigation.
Right. So when you speak of the litigation, since we're there, I read the book, but the listening audience we want them to go out and get this book, just give them a little bit about the litigation, what it was about, and also the ending results of it.
Yes, well, the gentleman's name was George P. Calkins, and his wife was Eleanor Newman, the First Lady of the Opera, and they was the owners of the Denver State Colorado Banks and owner of a citrus company called the Calkins Indiantown Citrus Company. And I was superintendent there. I ran what they call a feed mill, and that's where they take a concentrated orange juice processing plant where they made concentrated orange juice. And they take the orange peel and use it for a byproduct for cattle feed, and that unit that converted the orange peel to cattle feed was called a feed mill because it's a supplemental feed. And it gives the cattle feed mixture a 6% protein, and I was the one actually that was operating the citrus mill. And I was superintendent, and when I was hired, I hired in as a laborer, and I worked my way up and became superintendent.
Okay. And
in the process of the years, I operated for over 10 years, and they decided that they wanted to replace me with a white man by the name of Jack Rutledge, who had no experience in a mill. And
that sounds so familiar. That's a normal thing that happens here in America.
Yo, man, and I filed the EEOC, Equal Opportunity Commission, response to it. And they granted me the notice of right to sue in the United States Federal Court. I had the same judge that Manuel Noriega, the president of Panama, I had the same judge that he had, the judge that had him arrested and put in prison down in Miami, Florida. I had the same federal judge, Judge Hubler.
Oh, wow.
The famous black attorney, Willie Gary from Stuart, Florida, and Fort Pierce, Florida. I had him as one of my attorneys. He the one that filed the EEOC complaint for me.
Right.
And then later, I got the famous attorney David Littman that filed the civil rights suit against Alabama, I believe it was, that give black folks the right to vote. He was on the team. And then we ended up with Jack Scarola, Montgomery, Dennis Skersey, out of West Palm Beach in Tallahassee, Florida. And we had them on the team. And amongst them was a now sitting federal judge by the name of Moses Baker. He was my Moses in the wilderness, and he was my attorney as well.
So you had some power.
Yes, ma'am. Some power, yes, I did.
You were not playing, Mr. Robinson. You were not playing.
No.
You wanted to make sure that the information was heard, that justice was served, and you had some extreme power because the name Willie Gary, we know him. He's done some great things as an attorney with some celebrities. So
right.
His name really rings a bell.
Yeah.
And so just to see that you've actually had this amount of power for this case, so tell us what the ending result was.
Well, I also had the famous black psychologist, Dr. Marvin Dunn from the University of Miami, and we had Henderson as Mr. Marvin Dunn from the University of Miami. He did the analysis on the disparity of the effect that discrimination has on black people in general. And we had Henderson from the United States military. He did certain portions in the case for us as well. It was a high-powered and a high-powered profile case, and we ended up meeting the test. You know, back in 1989, there was a black woman by the name of Patterson
Mm-hmm.
And it was a case that was pending before the United States Supreme Court. And that was when they said that they had turned the clock back on civil rights in 1989. Ms. Patterson was suing a banking institution, and before the Supreme Court, there was 105 civil litigations that was depending upon the ruling of the Supreme Court, the rule in Ms. Patterson's favor, but they did not rule in her favor. And when the ruling came down against Ms. Patterson, 102 of the major litigations filed in this country fell through the loops of law. My case was one of the 3 cases that remained standing that withstood the law. And the law was you had to be discriminated against at the very moment of hire. Okay? Now, the very moment of hire meant that when you sit down and fill out the W-4 form and the man says, or the lady says, you are hired, that's the moment. Okay? That was the actual... Because
discrimination is not there at that particular moment.
Right.
You really don't know until you've been there for a certain amount of time. So
absolutely.
It's interesting how all these laws are in America that we really need to go back and look at them to see if they're fair to all Americans.
Well, that was the very moment of hire, and we had to meet what we call the test, and all the name calling, the racial slurs, being subjected to harsh environmental work areas. All of this had to happen at the moment of hire. And the N word, when you hear it and the reference that it was being used, in the context it was being used, if it didn't occur at the moment of hire, it didn't matter if it happened 5 years after you was hired.
Wow.
If you didn't get hired, failure to promote, if it didn't happen at the moment of hire. And the moment was when you fill out the W-4 form and the man says, or the lady says, you are hired. That was the moment. And when we went through the trial, we went through 8 weeks. My case was tried on an individual basis, and it lasted 8 grueling weeks. And during those weeks, I was actually called the N-word by the defendant while I was sitting on the stand. And the only thing that caused me to win the case was that when the jury made their elimination, was that they found that at the moment of hire, they put me on the time clock and put him on salary. That was considered the moment of hire. Then the company was found guilty of all the charges, which were 17 different charges brought against the company. Okay?
That is interesting.
Now, after that, the Supreme Court re-intervened and they came up with the 1991 Civil Rights Bill. Okay?
Okay.
Which made it, we was trying to get it retroactive, that it'll cover old cases in the past, but they wouldn't do that. I was solicited to speak before the Congress, myself and 2 other individuals that had similar cases, but they had enacted the laws before we had a chance to testify before Congress. But they put the new 19 Civil Rights Act in place, which shifts the burden of proof. Okay? So we are no longer under the 1989 law, but under the 1991 new law.
Okay.
So when you file discrimination, you don't have to prove that you were discriminated against. The company have to prove that you was not discriminated against. And that's to shift the burden of proof.
So they have to bring all of their evidence to make sure that they did not do anything illegal.
Absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And
Mr. Robinson, this is so interesting. I don't mean to stop here. We have to take a pause for the cause. We want to find out exactly what happened with this case and dig deeper, more into your book and more into your story. Mm-hmm. Stay tuned. Stay locked. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with author John Robinson of the book Chicken Scratch. We are back. Thank you so much for staying tuned in. I know the story that you are hearing thing about Mr. John Robinson with Chicken Scratchers has you just on edge and want to hear more. But we had to pause for the cause, but we're back. As we left off, speaking about the 1991 law that was established during the time he was going through his trial, and also just to find out information about how racism is actually just described, or how the court system describes it as being an employer in the United States. So, Mr. Robinson, let's go back where you left off in regards to that 1991 law.
All right. Well, that new law shifts the burden of proof, and the plaintiffs don't have to bring the burden; they just bring the charge. And when they bring the charge, then the companies have to show where they actually did promotions, and it shifts the burden. And black people don't realize to this day the maximum effect that it have and the power of that new 1991 Civil Rights Act and law. It really changed things in the course of history of America if it be utilized. But by the lack of knowledge, we suffer because we just simply don't know the laws.
And that's difficult. What do you say, lack of knowledge, my people shall perish?
Yes, exactly right.
So it's amazing because you're speaking on that, and I was just about to ask you that question. How many people know about this new law? Because I hear so many people going through discrimination on their job. So if they had the knowledge or were aware of these laws that are put in place, then a lot of justice would be served on some of these employers. They would probably do right, do better towards their employees. So it's really interesting that many don't even know about these laws that are put in place to protect employees.
You're absolutely right. You are absolutely 100% right. See, when we are in the dark and need to be brought to the light of a thing, that makes all the difference in the world. You give a person a little bit of light, they can find their way through it. And the problem that we have is we always is in the darkness and the dimness of the light of full understanding of the logistics of how this law worked for us. When you enter into the courtroom, believe it or not, you don't have no more rights than your presentation of your attorneys. Okay, if they lose the case, that meant you didn't have any rights. You follow me?
Yeah.
If we would have lost the case, that meant that we didn't have the rights. But by us winning, that established our rights here in the United States, and that established the corridors of doors opening for justice and equality by the law. But other than that, you don't have any rights until the balance of the scales of justice are balanced and you prevail. If you lose, it's like not having any rights. So then that brings the Constitution back into question. Now, if the Constitution is established to provide you the equality of a right, you shouldn't have to go through all the red tape you go through just to get a complaint filed to the EEOC. And that makes a difference.
Wow. That definitely makes a difference. And also reading in your book, as you mentioned, Dr. Marvin Dunn a little bit earlier, he did a forwarding in your book. And one of the things that he stated was, you are a brave man to survive in this racist South. And you also mentioned a little bit more about being black in America. You know, we're going through a lot of things here in America with Black Lives Matter. Our men are losing their lives in spite of that. In your words, what do you think it means to be black in America?
Well, to be black in America is like being exiled. Okay? According to from whence we came. What we have to understand is our history.
Right.
And how we got to where we are today. And what we are expecting based upon justice and equality. And that's based upon a lot of exclusion of the local laws that's in place, the local politics that's played every day. You know, when you look at the communities that we live in today, throughout all America, throughout the continental United States, you'll find the ghetto in every place you go. Okay?
You're definitely right. You sure will.
And that comes from not having nothing to start with. That's like our cuisine. A person will buy them, purchase them a chicken thigh, but the other person had to eat the chicken feet. You follow me?
Do you think that's a mentality? As far as, like you said, every city that you go to, there is a ghetto. We don't have to live that way. Some of us choose to live that way. Do you think that's a mentality that's been brought up from generation to generation to where we feel that we have to live in these states or the state of mind?
It creates a mentality. Poverty always creates a mentality because people started with zero, started with nothing. And everyone expects someone to have something, but how can you have something and you started with nothing and you have nothing, you don't have nothing economically to work with. So therefore, poverty breeds this mentality. And the only way we're going to get beyond that is by unification, by unifying ourselves and begin to do things for ourselves and cater to one another and realize everyone comes into our community and prosper off of us. Okay?
Right.
Now, we went from slavery to being a modern-day servant. That's the only difference.
That's interesting. Explain that.
Well,
What you mean by that.
All right. When you look through this continental United States, you see all the high-rises, right?
Right.
They are not owned by black people. Okay?
Correct.
And you got a nations of mountains of high-rises that's not owned by black people. We don't have the resources to own those high-rises. Okay? And what we find is we are economically scrapped because we started with nothing. We didn't have anything. We don't have any financial institutions on our side. Then you always have that railroad track of social divide. And people will come along and it'll create this mentality that we have because it's a breeder of poverty. That's one of the major problems that we have here in this nation.
So do you think that with the segregation and we combining all races, because I hear many civil rights leaders and I hear many activists mention that we as a people did a whole lot better when there was segregation, when we were having, we weren't attending our own schools, when we had our own shopping centers, and we put more into our communities. Do you think that's where it all possibly could have started?
Yes, it did start with that. We had our own renaissance, okay? There's no question. But what you have today is integrated segregation, where you live in a integrated community, but you are screened out and picked out because of the basis of race and color, okay, and natural origin. If you live on the south side, and it's the side where the ghetto is located, then you become a victim of redlining, okay, and you become a victim of predatory lending, and you just become victimized because of the way things is situated in this country, and it's designed with a complexity that didn't include me or you. We wasn't included. We was kind of like drafted into something, but not granted the tools to work with. All right, go out and build me a home, but you can't use a trowel to spread the mortar. Build me a home without the bricks. Build me a home without the lumber, but build me a home. How? That's the question. And you don't have none of the resources.
That is interesting. And when we get to the factor in our mind that we as a people can rise up, because if you look at the economics of it, Mr. Robinson, African Americans spend $1 trillion. Now it's increasing more in the economy of the United States of America. our buying power is stronger than any race in the U.S. And it's amazing that with our buying power being so strong, that we still have not rose up as a people to utilize that tool to demand what we want. What do you think about that?
Well, I believe it's a built-in trait from slavery, okay, that we do not unify ourselves to that degree because of a fear mentality. You know, I hear some people say is that the race is like a bunch of crabs. When you lift one up, you lift them all, right? But that same scenario is that if you look at pulling the crab out of the basket and he pull up the other one, it can also be used in a positive aspect that one is pulling the other one up out of the basket as well.
Right.
Not necessarily to pull the other one down. So what I'm saying is that we have to unify ourselves, cater to ourselves like they did in the days before integration occurred. Because back then we didn't have a choice.
Yeah. But now we do have the choice. And it seems like we're still living in that state of mind to where we don't have the choice. And in your opinion, how can we get out of that?
Okay, number one is we become too relaxed, okay? And dependent upon being a servant to get what we want. In other words, I can go down there to McDonald's and get me a job at McDonald's or Wendy's, okay? And get me a job there as a worker, and that makes me a servant. But why can't I have the attitude that I want to own my own McDonald's? I want to own my own Wendy's. See, we got to get into the ownership. Like I was talking about those high rises. People blacks that's successful. Start buying those high rises. Start promoting our own. And then we'll begin to make progression. But as long as we have a servant attitude, we'll always be the slave of servants.
That, you said a handful right there. As long as we have a servant attitude, we're going to be the slave of servants. And I see it more and more every day. I'm seeing a little bit different with the millennials that we have now. My daughter is a millennial, and I'm seeing it a little bit different to where they're now in that entrepreneurial state of mind to where they don't take nothing. Even when it's really even the employment industry that's been hiring millennials is really hard because they don't take anything.
You're right.
Yeah, and so I don't know if we're going to see a change in them that's going to make us be a little bit more set-free, but I'm seeing a difference in their attitude, state of mind. I don't know if they have to do with the new social media being out, and they're more conscious than we are, and they have access to more information. But I am seeing a change in this generation of wires and the centennials and millennials. I'm seeing a huge difference in them. What we want to do right now, Mr. Robinson, we want to take a break, but when we come back, I want to go in depth in your book. Let's talk about your life growing up. You have gone through some things that a lot of children are going through now, being in a blended family home, going through abuse. I would love for you to speak on how you got through that, because you touch on that in your book with your stepfather, Rufus, and some of the things he's done, and just reading some of the information that you actually put in the book and how open you were. It was really your testimony, but also eye-opening to parents who actually go into blended relationships to make sure their children are taken care of that they had before that marriage. So we want to go more in depth with that when we come back. Stay tuned. Stay right here. You're going to hear some more information right here with Mr. John Robinson of the book Chicken Scratch. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. And we are back with Mr. John Robinson of Chicken Scratch. He is filling us with information. He is giving us some business. We talked a lot about segregation and how our world, our society, our community as a whole is being handled. But what I really definitely want to get into right now, I want to get into this book. That's one of the reasons why we're here, the book Chicken Scratch, which is on sale right now. various locations, major retail stores, bookstores, Barnes and Nobles, Books A Million, Amazon. You can definitely go get that book right now. You need to read it. It's a good read. It gives you information about being black in America, how he actually won the case, what we talked about a little bit earlier. You definitely want to go grab this book, Chicken Scratch, by author John Robinson. So, Mr. Robinson, one of the things that I was reading in your book, and it was more so in regards to your mother. As you mentioned, your mother, who died at 81, am I correct, in 2011?
Yes, that's exactly.
Right. In 81, lived a long life, to say the so, but to also talk about being a parent, a single mother, who basically did not marry the person who she bared children with, but went into a marriage with another gentleman who they eventually had a child. But he had such a hatred for you, and there are a lot of children that are going through that. You see that on a lot of television shows now, how they're trying to make the world a little bit more prevalent of what's happening. Speak on just from how you felt, or just give us some information about that situation.
Well, you know, when we talk about our parents, automatically we talk about love.
Right.
And it's a agape type love, a love that's really undescribable. Okay? And my mom was a very loving person and a very sweet and humble lady. And she got involved. Well, let me put it like this. My father died in 1960, and
Okay.
I was born in 1954. I was 6 years of age, and her and Dad they didn't marry, but she met this gentleman by the name of Rufus Robinson, and I was Rufus' child until my sister was born. Okay, when my sister was born, he had a child of his own, and then the love I felt that he had for me just vanished.
Wow.
It just disappeared. And I don't know what caused him to turn the way he turned, but I became the victim of all of the animosity and hatred that he had within him. Looked like I became the target of that. And he became very abusive. The book explains in depth about how he come in and would beat up on my mom if she decided to put my little sister down when my sister was born. If she was nursing my sister and would put her down to see about me, he would actually jump on her and beat her up. So she couldn't put us, she couldn't even see about me. And then this one particular incident, I must have been right at 7 years of age. And he went off and his car wouldn't start. He went out one Friday night and he apparently left his lights on, and his automobile wouldn't start the next day. So we lived on an old farm, and he went down to his boss man place and got a tractor. I believe the old Ford tractor. And I never been on a tractor in my little life. And he went and got this tractor and he put it in front of his car and hooked the chain to it. And when he hooked the chain to it, he come and he revved the tractor engine up real loud, make it roar real loud, and had me to hold the clutch down. And I mashed the clutch down, and I'm standing up holding the clutch down with my hands gripping to the steering wheel of the tractor. And he put the tractor in gear, but when he put it in gear, he put it in reverse. And the tractor got what they call drawbars on it. Those are drawbars are bars that attach equipment to the tractor. Okay? As you can attach a mower to it, or a plow or something of that nature. And they was let down. They actually stirred away from the tractor. And it lined up with the radiator of his car. So when he told me to get up, he got inside the car and told me, he said, get up off the clutch. He said, let it go. And boy, did I let it go, because it was hurting my leg to hold it, and the tractor jumped back, was in reverse, and punched a hole in the radiator. And when it punched a hole in the radiator, the tire wedged itself against the tractor and stalled the tractor out, and it shut down. So instead of him jumping out to see about me, he jumped out and clenched his fist and hit me as hard as he could. And he must have been a man that weighed at least 215 or 20 pounds or more. And he hit me as hard as he could with his fist and knocked me off the other side of the tractor. And blood just gushed out of my face, my nose, my mouth, and till it clogged. And he let me know. I better not let my mom know he had hit me, and this kind of thing. And
that's interesting. You said not let your mom know when.
He made certain of that. And mom was keeping house for some people, and she walked in from work, and when she got there, she saw me all blooded up. She wanted to know what happened, and no house we lived on had steps to it. It was up off the ground. And she had been in behind me many times, not to get too close to the edge of the porch or the mat fall off. And I had to let her know that I fell off the porch, and then I got a spanking after that for falling off the porch. You know. So, anyway, that wasn't the end of it. The book will describe a time when he come in and he got into it with mom, and I ran and jumped over into an old well that we had and run of fear. And I feared the well, but the fear of him was greater than the fear I had for that old well. And I hung down in that well, hiding from him. And the only thing saved my life was my left feet. I got caught into a crevice inside of what the old well was made of, and I was able to hold myself and balance myself, and it hurt my feet. And I ended up crawling out of it. And I heard someone coming, and I broke and I ran into a tree, and I hid behind the tree, but then I heard the voice of my mom, and she didn't hardly have any clothes on. Where he had them beat her and the clothes was off. I went in the house and got a sheet and wrapped around my mom, and I led her through the woods to my grandparents. Yes, to the audience out there, be the guardians of your children.
Yeah.
You know, listen to them. Watch for signs of their ways. If they're acting a certain way and all of a sudden they start changing in their ways. My stepdad, he had one eye. And there was a time that my sister was playing out on the porch, and he come and he told me that he saw her in the road. And I says, no, she haven't left off the porch. And he had me to kneel down side the bed, and went out and got him what they call switches and planted them together. And he beat me across my back until my back whipped up real bad. And I wouldn't even allow my mom to bathe me. And, oh man, it was a real abusive relationship that he had with me.
My question to you, I want to say apologies for you going through that. Just as a mother, I could feel your pain because, like I said, being a mother, I just could not bear my child even going through something of that nature. And as I mentioned earlier, there are many children out there that are experiencing situations like that. I was watching on the OWN network, there's a show called David Making Man. And there is a child who's also going through that situation, is also being abused physically, mentally, sexually by the stepfather, a male child. So it's interesting that we as mothers, we have to definitely pay more attention to our children. But my question to you is, how long did your mother stay in that relationship? Did she eventually leave, or
yes.
Did she just...
Well, she eventually left him. We left Valdosta in 1963, I believe it was, and we ended up in a little place called Indiantown, Florida.
Okay.
And there she met a gentleman by the name of Elijah Wiggins, and he was from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and he was a amateur prize fighter, and I understood, I don't know exactly. Did he have the Golden Gloves? But I had always understood that he held the Golden Gloves at one time for amateur fighting, but him having a prison record kind of made that on the back burner in his life. And they had a real terrible relationship, and he get angry and frustrated. He would take mom for the punching bag, you know, and that's what led my life to change at the age of 12.
Mm-hmm.
And I mentioned that in my book. I talk about that relationship in Chicken Scratch.
Oh my goodness. So you're talking about not only domestic violence, child abuse, and so much more. What advice would you give to any children that may be listening to this interview today to survive situations like this? Because nowadays, I mean, when that time was happening, there wasn't that many organizations out there for situations like this. You have domestic violence organizations, you have child abuse organizations, hotlines where children can actually call and report certain things anonymously so they can seek help. So what would be your suggestion going through this? What would be your suggestion to tell children how to survive and how to get out of the situation as being children? Because they're children at the moment, so it's like how do they survive something like this? Because obviously you have, during a time when we had none of these resources.
Believe me, you are not alone. And that's the key to it, to realize that you are not alone. Talk to the one that you know love you. If it's your mom, talk to your mom. If the abuses are coming from the father. If it's coming from the mother, talk to the father. Talk to someone that you know that you can rely upon. Talk to officials. Talk to your teachers. Tell someone what you're going through. Because there's agencies out there that you definitely is not alone. That would be my message to them, is that they're not alone. See, love, the lack of love is like an abandoned island. Okay? It's like an abandoned island, the lack of love.
The lack of love is like an abandoned island. That's a word. The lack of love is like an abandoned island, basically being on an island by yourself. Nobody in there, no civilization, no communication, nobody to talk to.
I
get it.
Oh, you there all by yourself. You there all by yourself.
I completely get it.
Oh
wow.
We lived on a farm and had an old farmhouse. And you know, when you don't have what other children have. And we was taking almost like a little slave family. We was migrant workers, picking fruit, picking different oranges and apples and tomatoes, peaches, pears, plums. Okay? And you had to face that mentality dealing with society as a child. But when children is exposed to basically anything from an abuser, they really need to speak up to someone with some official. They need to talk to someone that they can depend upon. If it's just a friend, tell a friend. The friend will tell their mother, their father, but be sure to tell somebody.
Tell somebody. That we're going to take a pause for the cause, and that's a perfect place to end. Tell somebody. For those who listen to the sound of our voices, myself, Elena Sanders, also Mr. John Robinson, tell somebody. There are many resources out there to assist you, to help you. As Mr. Robinson stated, you are not alone. We rather see you survive and outlive the situation versus stay in that situation and may not see another day. It's a blessing, Mr. Robinson, that you were able to survive all of this information, all of this, everything that has happened to you. Now I see why Dr. Dunn said that you're the bravest man to survive this time during the Deep South, because all that you endured, that lets us know that there's a purpose for you on this earth, and God was not going to allow you to leave and abandon that purpose until it's fulfilled. And you created that book, Chicken Scratch. When we get back, let's talk a little bit more about surviving cancer. Let's end on that note about surviving cancer, because we know different months are coming up. We have breast cancer awareness months that are coming up, all cancer months and so forth, and you have survived cancer. So we want to talk a little bit more about that. Stay tuned. Stay right here. John Robinson, Chicken Scratch. Go get the book. All local retail stores, online, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, and many others that are out there. Borders. Make sure you go get the book right here. Stay tuned. Don't go anywhere. We're back. I know that the information you are getting is so informative that you just want to stay and find out what is going on with Mr. John Robinson in his book, Chicken Scratch. You're live with Elena Sanders and the author himself, and we have been talking about details in his book, which makes you want to go buy it today as soon as we get off of this network, or you can buy while you're listening and read along as he's explaining it. Makes you do that. Also, go and follow Mr. Robinson on his social media, Facebook.com/author John Robinson. That's Facebook.com/author John Robinson. If you would like to book Mr. Robinson to come on your show or whatever, make sure you send him an email at bookjrobinson@gmail.com. That's bookjrobinson@gmail.com. He is an awesome person to converse with and very informative, knowledgeable on what's happening in society, knowledgeable on the law because he's gone through it, but he has not only survived the law, he has also survived cancer. So with so much going on, we have the various cancer months that are coming up. Let's speak on, Mr. Robinson, your survival of cancer. Tell us first what type of cancer you had and how you actually went through this process.
Well, this cancer is equally as devastating as racism, okay? They both eat at your lives. I was diagnosed with terminal cancer, esophageal cancer, and it was malignant, and I was in the 4th stage, and something sent me back to the 3rd stage, and they removed my stomach, my pancreas, and took my small intestines and made me a small pouch called the Hunt Lawrence pouch. And I take shots once a month now. I take shots for the rest of my life because my body can't produce sugar. And periodically I have an attack where my sugar level drops and I go downhill like right now. Okay? If it starts dropping on me right now, I go downhill. I got to get something sweet and eat candies and something with sugar in it, and it lifts me back up.
Is it similar to being a diabetic?
Yes, similar to being a diabetic.
Okay.
Yes, it is. And I take B12 shots once a month. I was taking them every 2 weeks. Well, behind the cancer, I took 42 treatments of radiation, 42 treatments of chemotherapy. During the course of that, my normal weight was 215 to 220 pounds. I got down to a recorded weight of 103 pounds, and right now I weigh 145. Okay?
Yes, to that blessing. Yes.
Yes.
Sometimes we don't want to praise the weight, but in this situation, praise the weight.
Yes. Yes, you're right. They gave me 2 to 6 months to live, and they had me to see hospice. And, you know, when the doctor first found the cancer in me, he told me, say, you are done. I said, wow, see, my plane just crashed, and I don't know what I'm going to do. I guess I just pick up all the pieces and move on from there, I guess. And when hospice come in, they weren't explaining to me, you know, how they can make me comfortable and what they can expect and what for me to expect. And I let them know that, hey, you know, you virtually got the wrong person, you know. I understand the situation, and I went through that with them, and the doctor name was Forecroft that found the tumors in me, and he had another doctor by the name of Harvey Miller that he referred me to, and it was like 6 to 8 weeks between that time, and they was telling me about I had to take radiation and chemo and to help ease the pain and all of that and make it a smoother transition for my death. So I let them knew that whatever God planned, that's just how they end up. So by them mentioning radiation, I went out and bought me it sounded a little silly, you know, but I went out and bought me a 4-inch magnifying glass. And I had a trampoline out in my backyard. So I went and got on that trampoline every day, and I shined that glass on both sides of my stomach for about 30 minutes. And I did that for a period of weeks until I met with Dr. Harvey Miller. When Harvey Miller put me under and looked back inside of me, when 2 days after his results came, he called me and my wife in, and he says, my friend, says, I took and did a review. He said, what I found scars where the tumors, the neskin on your left side of your stomach was there. I found scars. He said, I found scars where the buckshot side tumors of the colony was on your right side, but the large tumor is still there. He says, I can remove that. He said, but somebody above moved the other ones, so it set you from the 4th to the 3rd stage, so they performed surgery. And when they performed the surgery, they gave me 5 years after surgery, and they predicted that I should die from pneumonia. Okay? And that's right at 12 years ago. Okay?
Wow.
Right at 12 years ago. And
amazing.
I'm still in remission. And, you know, it inspires me. So I dedicated the rest of my life to preaching the gospel of our Lord and Savior for what He's done for me, and promoting small businesses. I represent the black businesses and small businesses of Lowndes County here in Valdosta, and I dedicated the rest of my life for doing those type activities and standing up for civil rights. And it inspired me to write my book and to tell anyone out there that check on your health. Have a positive attitude. I lost all my teeth, okay? They was pulling them 6, several at the time. I went.
Get some new ones.
Yeah, I did.
We can get new ones now.
I got a new set, and yes, I did. And I went almost bald, but my hair came back, my beard come back gray like you see on the cover of the book, and I just keep it trimmed up. And I thank God for what He done for me. And now, one of the biggest supporters is love from your family. Okay?
Right.
And not have a lot of aggravation. I got diagnosed with the terminal cancer, and the chemotherapy that I took was something called Levorakin 5. It was so toxic until if you put it through my vein in my arm, it would, and if it leaked, they had to have plastic surgery to perform it. But they had to put it's something similar to a pacemaker in my chest and feed it directly into my heart. It was amazing that it was so toxic that it would eat my arms up, but it going directly into my heart, it didn't provide no harm to my body. And the theory was it do one or two things. It killed the cancer or the patient. Okay, and I stayed in isolation for 4 months. I couldn't go in the sunlight because the medicine they gave me called me to actually blister up, water blisters. So I stayed inside of my room in prison for 4 months. I couldn't use the same restroom no one else used because all my immunity was gone. And if a mosquito would bite me, I had a problem. So I made it through that. And I don't want to branch off of the cancer, but I want to go back to racism. That racism is equal devastating as the cancer is, and I sit on death row. If I sit here today and speak to you and says that, oh, I'm worried about dying, I would be lying because I'm not worried about dying. Okay? I'm worried about surviving. And the agony that we face on the everyday life of the racist cancer that's plaguing our nation and that plague our lives from day to day. I came from a migrant background. My oldest son have a master's degree in psychology. My next to the oldest son, he runs a family business that we started in 1983, and as a welding company, we did bridges, the big girdle beams, and welded the big girdle beams on bridges. We worked on sanitation equipment for waste management in different companies, and did like half of the state of Florida for them. Then my other son, I have 4 sons. One named John. He got a business called Tribe. It's an architectural firm. He went to Savannah School in Art Design, SCAD. And my baby son, he's an engineer, and he went to Georgia Polytech right there in Atlanta. Okay, and he got a business called Scribe Engineering. Okay, so coming from a migrant background, I feel that I've come a long way fighting the cancer that's plaguing our society, and then sit on death row in the end, and knowing that I'm going to leave this world with a terminal illness, whether if I'm in remission or not, I yet have to have a positive attitude. Okay? You don't allow no negativity.
Yes, the mind is so important, and it's interesting that you speak on that because I went through a similar experience, not personally, but with my mother, who had that positive attitude that you had, Mr. Robinson. And then once the doctor came in and said, "That's it, it's done," before my eyes, I saw my mother deteriorate because her mental state.
That's right.
Went to I must die.
That's right.
Yeah. So that mind is so powerful, and I tell my students that as well, that your mind can tell your body or whatever to do whatever it needs to do, but you got to think. You got to change the way we think.
Yes.
Our brain is built up of 80 to 100 million neurons.
You're right.
Change
You're right.
our mental state ourselves, but we have to be in the right state of mind to be able to do that, and you have accomplished that to even go to be sent to hospice. Everybody knows once you're sent to hospice, that's it.
That's it. That's right. You're right.
And you beat that whole point of saying, "Hey, no, I'm not about to go here. He's not about to put me on a deathbed and drug me up and to where I can't recognize what I'm doing or recognize what's in the room and put me in a state of mind to where my mind cannot work and I cannot tell my mind what to do to say I'm going to be well, I'm going to be healthy, this is going to change, I'm going to live past that 5-year mark."
Absolutely right.
And you did all of that, and you are an example of it can be done, and I appreciate you doing that and letting the listening audience know that it can be done. You can change your situation just by changing the way you think.
Absolutely right. And as long as you realize in life that you are your greatest asset and that your entire body is only a tool of the mind, as long as you know that, you can survive it. You can survive it.
Your entire body is the tool of the mind. Quoted by Mr. John Robinson. I'm going to tell you what your next project needs to be. You need to write a book of quotes. Because nowadays it's so important with the book of quotes. You have so many people using quotes and putting them on their social media. Just by having a book of quotes to give people information, just to go refer to keep the positivity just going through the social network. A book of quotes should be your next project to sit down and just write everything. Because everything you said to me has been a quote that I would want to use. Your mind is a tool. Your body is a tool of the mind. That's something I would want to post. But those are your words that you could be selling in a book.
I hear you. But it's true.
Guys, today it's been a blessing just to hear from author John Robinson, the book Chicken Scratch. You need to go purchase this book. You can Google him, type in Chicken Scratch John Robinson. You can purchase it online through Amazon, Walmart, as well as Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, many other bookstores that are out there. It is out there for you to purchase. Go support independent authors. It's really important to support independent authors. because we don't need a huge publishing company that's out there. We can do this with support that's in our community. So go out and do that and support Mr. Robinson to make sure that this information is getting out, because we need to have this information get out, because he has a story to tell that needs to be told. Mr. Robinson, are there any lasting words you would like to leave for the listening audience?
Yes, the last thing I like to leave you with is keep a positive mind and remember that you are your greatest asset.
Yeah. Thank you so much. You are listening to Elena Sanders and also with Mr. John Robinson, author book of Chicken Scratch. Again, go and get that book. Thank you for tuning in, and many blessings.